Namaste. Welcome to our third symposium on Hindu Vanavasi traditions. This is the topic is taken for this symposium, but for the earlier symposiums, we chose other topics. The format of symposium has become very convenient to invite distinguished guests for us. The earlier format used to be conferences. As conferences, we conducted around 20 to 23 conferences on various topics. During the time of series of conferences, we invited papers from scholars, abstracts are sent, and a review committee selects the abstracts and papers are arranged, and there are distinguished speakers also as part of the conference. But in the symposium format, we are not including invited abstracts, selected abstracts, or any such thing. The entire panel is made up of panelists who are invited as distinguished speakers. For those who are not acquainted with INDICA Academy, INDICA and its activities, just a small introduction. INDICA Academy is a non-traditional university for traditional studies. It is an organization committed for Indic Renaissance or Hindu Renaissance, so to say. And we work under three categories of our activity: preservation, protection, and promotion. Under preservation, we conduct activities of promoting, supporting, giving grants to activities that have been happening from millennia, from centuries in the country. For example, Veda Gurukulas, Shastra Gurukulas, or Gurukulas that are for Sthapatya, sculpting, Gurukulas that are there for folk art activities, or forest dwelling, indigenous, tribal, cultural activities. All the activities that have been happening from generations, continuing that is what we are calling preservation. The other is protection. Protection is actually countering the activities that are going against this preservation activity, or countering the activities which are misinterpreting Indic culture or Hindu culture. Activities that answer questions that are raised about Indic culture or Hindu culture. Activities that flag the misrepresentation of Indic culture or Hindu culture. All such activities are categorized under protection. The other third category is promotion, under which actually we have many wings like Center for Soft Power and other wings. And our founder, Harikiran Vadlamani Garu, who is the visionary behind every one of these activities, it is his incessant creativity that brings up every new activity. Even this symposium is out of his imaginative, visionary creativity that this idea of symposiums has come into existence. He keeps using a word called cultural entrepreneurship. He encourages people to come up with cultural products. And the INDICA Academy is committed to promote such cultural products with which people come up. Whatever cultural product. even if it is a YouTube video or a cultural object that you want to sell, or it is a cultural entrepreneurial organization out of which you want to continuously manufacture or generate products. Indica Academy is committed to uh, provide financial help, network help, and publicity help, connecting help for all the promotion of activities that are contemporary, and they bring contemporaneity to the traditional cultural uh, well-being of Indic culture or Hindu culture. As part of this, Indic Academy has been conducting several activities, particularly the Wing Indica, of which I have the responsibility. Here we focus on academic activities. As part of these academic activities, workshops are being conducted, discussions are being conducted. We have an online course platform also, and we uh, conduct conferences, as I already mentioned, and symposiums is a new idea. And the last symposium was on Devadasi traditions, and there was also a symposium on Jati Puranas. And this particular symposium is focusing on the Hindu forest dwelling communities and cultures. Some of the speakers of the symposium themselves used the word tribe and tribals in this context. Internationally, globally, the word tribe has come into a kind of questioning. The value connotation behind a tribe and tribal has come under heavy questioning. That is why we wanted to kind of avoid, not completely that word, because it has got its own value in communicating what people think about forest dwelling cultures. There is another category which is, I would call, government category, called scheduled tribe, ST. And government, through its bureaucracy, through its governmental procedures, has its own way of identifying a particular community as ST, scheduled tribe. So there, that word has its own criterion. That's not exactly what we are focusing here for this particular symposium. But we need to look into certain aspects of these terms themselves. One word that has been used uh, across the global academics is aboriginals. Another word is primitive people. Both these words, aboriginals and primitive, also have their own value connotation. One problem with primitive is that it comes from the evolutionary anthropological, cultural anthropological model, and has inherent in it the idea that the culture always grows from a low level knowledge base to a high level knowledge, advanced knowledge. And primitive uh, human groups were not evolved enough, advanced enough, developed enough in their culture. So it obviously and automatically gives a low looking attitude. That word primitive has got a low looking attitude. And it is from such cultural anthropological studies that people started developing among the youngsters the idea that forest dwelling cultures are living prehistory. They are continuing the same prehistorical uh, lifestyle that they lived, and they are continuing the same lifestyle even today. So, if there is a cultural anthropologist or a paleontologist or a physical anthropologist who would like to see how probably in the beginning the communities lived, the best way as a laboratory, as a sample piece, is to go to the present forest dwelling cultures and watch them. But this has been heavily discarded all over the world cultural anthropological studies because of the evidences that there are all over the world. There are evidences to show that most of the forest dwelling cultures, if not most, at least a considerable uh, amount of considerable section of the forest dwelling cultures are adaptations to the forest environment. Those cultures which were there earlier as city cultures, also they migrated. Those peoples, those groups migrated to forest areas and adapted to the forest culture, and the forest dwelling culture among that group developed because of the adaptation to the environment. So this is a very strong counterexample to the theory that forest dwelling cultures are living prehistory. They have conserved the primitive culture. Within India, there are these words Vanavasi and Adivasi are repeatedly being pitched against each other. There was an article in one of the newspapers where they were saying that why Adivasi has to be preferred for Vanvasi, and why those who are picking up the word Vanavasi are going against Adivasi. They were trying to conjecture the political and ideological reasoning behind discarding the word Adivasi. Again, we have to remember that the word Adivasi also has got a translation tendency from the other pejorative usages like aboriginal, primitive, etc. And the word aboriginal uh, might give an impression that it is actually projecting the forest dwelling communities as the sons of the soil of a particular land, but actually inherently it has got this attitude of projecting these communities as those who are not developed, who are not knowledgeable, who do not have skills comparable to the civil people, comparable to the city dwelling people, and those who lack civilization. So it is the word Vanavasi is very close to the word forest dwelling, which actually uh, has the intention of showing that cultures need not and should not be evaluated in a graded way that certain settlement pattern is superior to the other settlement pattern. For example, prioritizing or showing city dwelling culture as a superior culture, or technology culture, modern culture, science and technology culture as a superior culture, and the other cultures like village dwelling culture or forest dwelling culture or a nomadic culture or itinerant culture and other settlement patterns that are there among peoples as lower to the urban and city and science and technology and modern cultures, this should be avoided. That can be avoided when we use neutral words like forest dwelling or its translation like Vanavasi cultures. Another point that at this point we have to focus attention towards is that is mentioned already in our concept note. It is in India that a researcher in culture, if he wants to study forest dwelling cultures, need not all the way travel to South America or Africa. Whereas in most of the European nations or United States or other Western cultures, including in Australia where they had their own the so-called aboriginal groups, the academicians interested in culture research are traveling all the way to a very distant place. Whereas, if you want to study a forest dwelling culture in India, the academician staying in a city university, can just go outside his campus and visit a forest dwelling hamlet and study forest dwelling cultures. How has this become possible? How is it that forest dwelling cultures are so much available today here? Why not in the other parts of the world? Number one, the European nations themselves, in very recent times also, were forest dwelling cultures. This they have been mentioning during environmentalist literature when there were attacks on Western societies that they are responsible for the ecological crisis or environmental crisis. They started claiming that, oh, we were also forest dwelling cultures. During our forest dwelling stage of history, we were also environmentalists, we were also ecological. It is at a later stage that we lost that culture. And one of the reasons why the European cultures lost that forest dwelling uh, culture is invasions from Europe itself, from Romans, for example, to the other parts of Europe, and later expansionist religions like Christianity spread to those areas. And another very big jolt to the forest dwelling and rural and nature adapting cultures in Europe was modernity, industrialization, science and technology. And at that stage, entire urbanization has become the pattern. And at the time of modernity spreading, science and technology spreading, industrialization spreading in Europe, there were attempts to preserve folklore, folk culture, culture popular, popular culture. Museums were developed so that all that was going to be completely washed away under modernity impact, science and technology impact, industrialization impact, was sought to be preserved in the form of museums, in the form of archives. But alas, today they lost the entire pre-modern culture of those nations. What to say about United States? They, when they colonized that landscape, the forest dwelling cultures of that area were completely destroyed, and some of them are preserved even today for tourism purposes to show to the visitors. And in Latin America, in South America, Spanish invasion destroyed the forest dwelling cultures of that area. So the destruction of indigenous cultures, destruction of forest dwelling cultures is one formula. The other formula is the invading forest dwelling culture, destroying cultures themselves. Once upon a time, they themselves were forest dwelling cultures and they lost it because of rapid urbanization. And today, UNESCO, which is formed out of such urbanized cultures only, city prioritizing cultures only, urban prioritizing cultures only, now comes up with a cultural diversity expression, diversity of cultural expressions charter and wants to preserve diversity of cultures. Today, after environmentalist awareness, ecological awareness, there is a huge uh, activity all over the world for preservation of diversity. If you come back to India and see what happened here, here the forest dwelling cultures have been surviving for millennia only because of this environmentalist awareness existing as part of the worldviews of all the cultural strands and traditions of this culture. That is named as Hindu by the visitors during medieval times. When they visited the other side of the Sindhu, which they pronounced as Hindu, whatever they culture they found here, they called it Hindu culture. And for them, that culture was a single culture. All the commonalities among all the different settlement pattern cultures, forest dwelling, village dwelling, city dwelling, all kinds of these cultural strands, cultural components within the cultural complex that they gave the name Hindu. They would give a single name Hindu only when they find the commonality within that. That commonality is what kept all these different settlement pattern based cultural varieties as one single culture called in their own language, in the language of the outsiders, Hindu. And these cultures, what the world today is asking for, diversity, 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 it remained here because these cultures were environmentalist oriented in their worldview from the beginning. That is why they were diversity oriented. And because each of them was diversity oriented, they allowed the other culture to survive. No culture wanted to completely convert the other culture into its own template. It is because of the absence of an attitude of superiority that my culture is superior, so your culture has to be completely extinguished. I would completely convert you. Today, for example, when we consider one kind of knowledge, education, as the knowledge, the education inside our contemporary education system, what we are doing is we are trying to convert all other knowledge systems also into this template of what we call education today. We are looking at other knowledge systems For example, the medical knowledge of forest dwelling people as a primitive attitude towards healing, curing, disease removing, and all that, and projecting one kind of medical system as the advanced medical system. That's one example. That goes for all other knowledge areas and skill areas. Here we are projecting one kind of knowledge as the best, and we are trying to convert the other cultures into that. So, for example, if I am giving modern education to the forest dwelling communities' children, establishing modern schools there, teaching them English, teaching them science, teaching them atomic structure, teaching them trigonometry uh, or calculus from modern mathematics, then we are considering ourselves to be doing a great favor to them by giving them education. We are not saying that it is a kind of education. We are saying that we are converting them into educated people. So we have very clearly made one knowledge system as the knowledge system and are trying to impose it on other cultures and other people groups and other community groups. And it is as part of this that there is a claim that even ancient Vedic people, Shastra knowledge, was not offered to these people that way. The way the modern society is doing, the way modern society is trying to convert all other knowledge systems into their own knowledge systems. But if you realize that this attitude of looking down upon other knowledge systems is the source behind converting them by giving them the so-called modern education, then people would realize that if a Shastra scholar considered, for example, if an Ayurveda scholar considered the forest dwelling medicine as equally good system, equally robust system, powerful system, it is for that reason that he did not want to convert the forest dwelling medical system into his own. There is no attitude of denying and all that. So this is the crux of the whole thing. Crux of the whole thing is that if you have respect for the other culture, then you would not try to convert that culture and try to educate them. That has that is what has happened in this country for millennia. Neither of these cultures wanted to dominate the other. The third final point that we need to focus on is the present tribal policy, the governmental policy towards the forest dwelling cultures. Right from the beginning of our independent Indian government has been borrowed from the British. If you look into the historical evidences from the medieval times, you would realize that the what they call feudal rulers or the kings and the queens of ancient and medieval times, they had a very good relationship with the forest dwelling cultures. One very good example that people like me who live in the Telugu speaking areas get is the example of the Chenchus. The Chenchu forest dwelling community or Chenchu tribe, so to say, to use the contemporary word, however bad it is, the Chinchu tribe people where there are kaifiyats, the local documents from medieval times, in which it is mentioned how the medieval kings had very good coordinating relationship with this community. And this community, which was, for example, living in both the areas of Ahobil, where the Narasimha shrine is there, and the other place, Srishailam, where the Mallikarjuna shrine is there. In both these places, they used to maintain the temple and also help the pilgrims to the Mallikarjuna temple or the Ahobil temple to wade through the forest areas which are dangerous for travel because of the wild animals and all that. And the kings used to financially also help them. They used to help the forest dwelling communities in many other ways. And these documents mention how those positive relationships were there. When you look at such history, you would realize that it is the modern state which has been cruel towards the forest dwelling communities. So the these aspects we have to realize, and my introduction was supposed to be for 15 minutes because of my involvement in the area from 3.5 decades. Probably I took more time than stipulated for me. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. With this introduction, I welcome you all to this very significant symposium